meantime, David, politics has been continuing, and obviously on Friday, Dominic Raab resigned following allegations of bullying. We're going to be talking a bit more about that in a second, but he wasn't the only politician to be sanctioned. Diane Abbott also got it in the neck.
Yes, and in both cases, I feel that there's a lot of injustice in this, and actually quite concerning themes that are coming out. So firstly, we have the Times here speaking about Diane Abbott, and they're saying that she's been suspended, the whip's been removed, and the reason is, she was disciplined for claiming Jewish people could not suffer from racism, right? Which is a strange kind of summary of what happened. So what actually happened? Well, she put a letter into the Observer, into the Guardian, an Observer newspaper. And the letter, we've got a copy of it here, read, it's not very long, so it refers to an existing article called Racism in Britain is Not a Black and White Issue, it's far more complicated. She says, this article claims that Jewish and traveller and Irish people all suffer from, quotes, scare quotes, racism. They undoubtedly experience prejudice. This is similar to racism, and the two words are often used as though they're interchangeable. It is true that many types of white people with points of difference, such as redheads, can experience this prejudice, but they are not all their lives subject to racism. In pre-civil rights America, Irish people, Jewish people, and travellers were not required to sit at the back of the bus. In apartheid South Africa, these people were allowed to vote. At the height of slavery, there were no white-seeming people manacled on slave ships. That last one, of course, ignores the 1.5 million white people from Europe taken by the Barbary pirates for the slave trade in the East. And by the way, it was genocidal because all the men were castrated so they wouldn't produce any offspring. But Diane doesn't care about that. Now, this is a bit of a crass letter, but it comes from our ideology, and more on that later. The original article it's referring to by Tomina Obolade, beg your pardon, it says racism in Britain is not a black and white issue, it's complicated. So she describes how she was told in sixth form, a student told her with utter confidence that white people can't be victims of racism. Racism is about power and privilege. White people have the power and privilege, and black people and Asians don't. This means the latter group can be victims of racism. Racism is an exercise of power and privilege against people of colour. So this is the social justice warrior redefinition of racism. They've changed the meaning of the term for political gain. Okay. She was explaining how she immediately thought, well, this isn't right. This just doesn't strike me as honest. There's something wrong here. And she concludes her article with, there are racial inequalities in a society, this much is true, but it should be approached with subtlety rather than simplicity. This is because ethnic minorities people can have diverse experiences. And any commitment to fighting racial disadvantage needs to incorporate the complex truth if it wants to be truly effective. Morally speaking, racism is a black and white issue, but when it comes to how it manifests itself, it's multidimensional. And the most comprehensive survey on racial equality for 30 years needs to be examined comprehensively. And that survey illustrated that both Jewish people and traveller communities were amongst the most commonly reporting that they had experienced racism. Now, the issue here is in part that the term is very confused. The term's actually essentially inaccurate, right? There are not many races of men. There are one race of men. They're not different genuses of men. They're not different kinds of mankind. There's one kind of mankind. There are different nations, there are different ethnicities. But that's the idea of race has a pretty murky past. Part of the murky past is things like the Babylonian Talmud saying that the Hamites were punished with black skin. So you had inherent, you had racism built into religious ideas that go way back. But also, and more immediately and more relevant to our society, as reported here in Wiki, amongst other sources, that you have a situation where race acquired its modern meaning in the field of physical anthropology through scientific racism starting in the 19th century. This is with Darwin, etc. With the rise of modern genetics, the concept of distinct human races in biological sense has become obsolete. In other words, as the science has progressed and we've got a little more understanding, we've realized that the historical idea that all mankind shared a common ancestry and a common humanity was correct, and the 19th century scientific racist ideas were unscientific nonsense. But still, these ideas permeate society, and they permeate the sort of pool of ideas that Diane Abbott is drawing from. But I'm still very concerned that she's been suspended from it. The idea that it was anti-Semitic, the statement, no, it was crass, and it wasn't directed against Jewish people. It was directed against anyone with light-coloured skin. And we should be having a conversation with her about why she's wrong, not looking to pin her to the wall and pin the anti-Semitism label on. I find this is troubling, unhelpful, inaccurate, and it's closing down a debate that actually needs to be had. What do you think, Mike?
Yes, I agree. Of course, probably the reason they've played this particular card in this particular case is because of her association with Jeremy Corbyn. And so in that case, it is a lazy way to get rid of her. But I take every point that you've made there. Now let's come on to Dominic Raab then, and we mentioned his resignation letter. Sorry, on Friday we read a little bit out of it, but you've got a couple of paragraphs from this you want to mention.
Well, I mean, just the second short paragraph here is that in setting the threshold for bullying so low, this inquiry has set a dangerous precedent. It will encourage spurious complaints against ministers and have a chilling effect on those driving change on behalf of your government and ultimately the British people. And I thought that had the ring of authenticity and accuracy about it. We have here an article from the Times, how Dominic Raab was brought down over the bullying report. And he's basically, you see the cartoon here, he's being skewered, he's been stabbed in the back by the Humphrey Applebys of this world. So this is the line the Times were taking. Dominic Raab spoke to the BBC and was much more specific. He said that he was upset, he was sorry if he upset anyone, but it wasn't bullying. He said there was a risk that a very small minority of officials with a passive-aggressive culture are trying to block reforms they do not like. So he's talking about a handful of very senior officials. And he says again, if the threshold for bullying is lowered that low, it's almost impossible for ministers to deliver for the British people, and I think it will have a chilling effect on effective government. The British people will pay the price. He added that a lot of ministers were now very fearful that the direct challenge that they bring fairly and squarely in government may leave them at risk of the same treatment that I've had, he said. Now, this is an indication that there's a culture where you've got a small number of activists, politically motivated and essentially subversive in that they're looking to change government policy, they're looking to prevent the decisions of the elected government, whatever you think of democracy, that's the system we have, being put through by essentially fabricating attacks on individual ministers to take out anyone who causes too much trouble. Who runs the country? This was the theme of the Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister comedies in the 80s. Who runs the country? Is it the civil service or is it the politicians? Now, this is not the only government minister that spoke out.
Just before, sorry, David, just before you move on to that, I just wanted to touch on that a little bit because while Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister were taking a satirical look at the civil service and asking the question, who's running the country? It was really only that, when was that? That was the 1980s. It was really only when Tony Blair became Prime Minister that notion, which was satirical, became factually reality because Tony Blair made some significant constitutional changes at that time and made the civil service much more powerful, power concentrated in the Prime Minister's office initially and then in the Cabinet Office, and the Cabinet Office grew from being a couple of thousand people to actually, we don't really know exactly how many thousands of people are working for the Cabinet Office at the moment. and that the role of ministers in the meantime has changed from being one where at least they notionally set policy to being one where, in fact, they're simply selling policy to the population. And that was a really fundamental change. And if anybody thinks that this was a party political change, of course, it wasn't, because those changes that Tony Blair began in 1998, David Cameron continued in 2010 once he became Conservative Prime Minister. And so this is something that goes beyond party politics again.
Yes, and we've seen this obviously in Scotland with when the SNP government first came in. The main policy innovations that they were selling, you're quite right to use that word, were generated by the civil service. Oh, we've got some good ideas on the shelf. The last team wouldn't push them forward, but new broom, you might be interested. Here's the ideas, and the SNP ran with them. They didn't generate them. Right? It wasn't something, name person and the whole Scottish model of government and whole removing departmental divisions and integrating the thing into a whole giant blob. All of this came from the civil servants. So John Eldridge et al. As I said, it's not the only time this has come up. In recent years, Kemi Badenoch spoke out about this last year, July 22, over the Tavistock clinic issues. She said, official advice, government officials were telling me not to meet the clinicians who are whistleblowers, tell me not to meet the children who have been damaged, who've received treatment there, and having to fight so much. She added, when she started asking questions, meeting minutes would suddenly get leaked, and mysterious freedom of information requests would be submitted trying to get at details from whistleblowers. I think it's a very hard thing to do right now because there's so much obstruction, and that's something we need to fix. So she's talking about obstruction of government policy. Now, in this case, she was trying to find out if the Tavistock clinic, which is now being closed down because of the harm it was caused, was harming people. And she had officials trying to keep her from speaking to the people who had been harmed, which is outrageous. And she summarised it as a small minority of activists. She said that civil servants fell into three categories. There's a small minority of activists who are not impartial, a large group who will just do whatever is easiest, and some really brilliant ones. And I thought that was an excellent summary of what the civil service currently is.
And this small minority of activists, where could they have come from? David, is this the common purpose at work again?
Common purpose, this is also the long march through the institutions. This is the idea that the far left will not have a revolutionary change in this country, but will simply capture the institutions and change things by stealth, by gradualism, by slowly taking over all of the institutions of society which we trust. And this was effectively a policy. I mean, we can remember when people were openly admitting you couldn't get a job in the BBC unless you were a Marxist, because you had to comply with the agenda. You had to comply with the basic, the politicization of in this case the news or the entertainment. You had to comply with the belief system, the faith. Otherwise, you weren't welcome. And on that subject, I picked this off of Twitter. And I thought it summarized things very well. So here we got an explanation of Gnosticism. So Eve is speaking to the serpent, and the serpent says, Eve, this paradise is a lie. It's made by an off-brand god to keep you down, girl. Take this Gnostic knowledge and see and smash the prison, ignite the divine spark within, and make the real paradise you deserve. So that's a summary of Gnostic beliefs, which have been around for millennia. And they're comparing it to Marxism, right? Whereas Eve, capitalism is a lie, made by the bourgeoisie to keep you down, girl. Take this Marxism, smash the prison, ignite the class consciousness within, and make the real paradise you deserve. And feminism, Eve, the patriarchy is a lie made by men to keep you down, girl. Take this feminism, smash the prison, ignite the feminist consciousness, and create the real paradise you deserve. And critical race theory also. This white supremacy is a lie made by white people. If you ignite your race consciousness, you'll have the paradise you deserve. And then finally, queer theory. This normality is a lie made by straight cis people. take this queer theory and ignite the queer consciousness within and make the real paradise you deserve. Now, I believe that these comparisons and the underlying Gnostic nature of the ideas that we're seeing there are actually correct. And a good deal of this is coming out in people like Diane Abbott. And I suspect in the activists within the civil service that are driving so many of the agendas, or at least stymieing any pushback against these agendas. And as a result, slowly changing our society in ways that we haven't chosen, that we don't want, we wouldn't vote for, and really being discussed.
Okay, thank you for that, David. Now